Digital 410 Media proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt Podcast with your hosts, Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Dennis Blocker.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt Podcast, your favorite World War II-based podcast. And boy, howdy, do we have an episode tonight. I'm not even going to bog you guys down with the promos and this and that and the request for you to go do these other things. We're going to get straight to it. Jeff, do us the enormous pleasure of presenting this week's guest.
It is an enormous pleasure, and it was an honor to meet this man in person a few weeks ago. Dennis and I had that unique, distinct pleasure. And joining us tonight is the one and only Captain Dale Dye. If you let's just say this: if you've seen a military movie in the last 40 years, you know who Dale Dye is. He comes with just no introduction. His reputation precedes himself, but what we want to do tonight is find out a little bit more about the man, about what he has created, and get into some of his other work, like being an author as well. It's really interesting to note that. I was not familiar with that till recently. So, Captain Dye, again, thanks for taking your time out and joining us tonight.
Oh, I'm glad to, guys. It's one of my favorite topics, so we're right in the wheelhouse.
Absolutely. And we kind of planned this around that 80th anniversary of the invasion of Peleliu, of course. I talked to Scott about a week ago before he hit Guam, and I told him I wish I was there with him and have fun and everything over there. But so, as I mentioned before, of course, as a former Marine, sir, of over 20 years, obviously you were probably a Mustang after 20 years getting out as a captain. It's either that or you just did something really wrong.
Well, it might have been both, but I was 30 years enlisted
right
before I got my commission. So
outstanding, and a tour in Vietnam as well.
Several,
yeah. So, what I was curious about was how does that your military service, how did that play into you starting Warriors Inc. and what did that transition look like? And I ask you that because from a former service member myself. And I'm a teacher now. I'm a high school teacher. And they ask me all the time, how does that help you? And a lot of times it doesn't help at all. That's a whole different world. And so curious as to how much you took from the Marines to start Warriors Inc.
Well, the plain fact of the matter is I took everything. What prompted me to have come up with this concept was that most of the military movies I had seen, and I think I'd seen them all, the common denominator was they pissed me off. And the reason was it didn't reflect who I knew professional military people were. And it certainly had a false imagery, a false depiction of what combat is and how people react in combat. And I couldn't figure it out. Frankly, I'm a Marine and I pick my nose a lot and eat crayons, so I couldn't figure these things out. What is it? Why was Hollywood doing this? Don't they know what the truth is? And more importantly, in my view, don't they know that the truth, the way things are, who we are, how we relate to each other, and what combat really is so much more interesting, so much more dramatic, really, than what they were coming up with, these writers who'd never spent a day in uniform had come up with. And I said, well, that's a terrible mistake. And not only that, it's a disservice to those of us who wear the uniform or wore it, and those of us who fought, no matter when the war was, because I believe the warrior spirit is the same throughout history. Somebody's got to fix this. And when you're ignorant, you could do a lot of things that people tell you can't do, and that was certainly my case. So I said, well, screw it. I'm just going to fix bayonets, and I'm going to go out there in LA and square that place away. It didn't quite work out that way. I retired. But to direct myself back to your question, I had this, what the Marine Corps had taught me was that you don't give up in the face of frustration. Usually frustration comes because you don't know something. So I set about to try to find out how this movie business worked. Who are the movers and shakers? Who are the generals and the colonels and the gunnies? And how do I get in there and influence that? And it took me about a year. And frankly, my concept, which once again, to your question, came from my experience in the Marine Corps. How do you teach people? Well, you reduce them to the lowest common denominator, and then you build them into a unit, and then you teach them, and you do it in kind of a crawl, walk, run method. So that's what I thought we should do with actors. They should have some sort of concept, some sort of idea of who we are and how we do things and what combat is like before they try to depict us. And so, as I said, I wasn't having very much luck with this. People would look at me and say, hey, you, two things here. First of all, we don't do that to actors. And secondarily, you're some kind of Marine or something, aren't you? And you were in there for 20 years, 2 decades. How could you conceivably have a creative bone in your body? So get out of my house.
Wow.
Well, I was going
And there I was. I mean, and so I call it Hollywood hubris. And frankly, it was a tough deal going up against it. And I was out there for about a year and really, really exercising what the Marine Corps had taught me. And that is, don't give up. Don't give up. This concept is there. You may be broke. You may be couch surfing in your buddies' apartments. And you may be tremendously frustrated, but don't give up. This concept is correct. It's proper. All you've got to do is find a guy who will understand it. So after about a year, I was about to give up. I was about to say, okay, I think I got beat here. I didn't make the connection. And then that epiphany moment came. You may have heard this before, but I had learned to read the trade papers, the Hollywood trade papers like Daily Variety and Backstage and that sort of thing, the Hollywood Reporter. And I noticed a column, a little notice in a column, a little blurb in a column that said, a heretofore relatively unknown writer-director by the name of Oliver Stone is going to do a movie based on his own experience as a combat infantryman in Vietnam. And I said, whoa. There it is. I got to find this guy. If anybody will understand the concept at full immersion training, because he's been through it, he will. And I set about making that one meeting, making that one contact. And I can't really tell you how I did it because the statute of limitations may not have run out yet. But suffice to say that I managed to get myself a meeting with Oliver Stone's producer. And I pitched him and I said, look, all I want is 5 minutes. If you'll give me 5 minutes with this guy, just say veteran to veteran, so he'll get it. If I could just talk to him, I think I can guarantee you that he'll understand what I'm talking about. So he was cutting another movie at the time in Hollywood. It was Salvador, and they arranged for me to go into his cutting room and talk to him. And they said, "You got 3 minutes." And I said, "Oh shit! This is I'm now in my I'm now in 2-minute drill here." So I went in and I hit the position of attention and I commenced. And I told him what I thought was wrong with military movies and how we should fix it, and that he ought to know that, and I certainly know that from our combat experience. If we're going to truly do a depiction of what it was like for certain units, not all units, but certain units in Vietnam, then he should understand what I'm trying to tell him is needed here. And lo and behold, I don't know whether I sold him or not. Frankly, because they elbowed me out of the cutting room after a while, and I went home in my buddy's house actually, and I said, "Oh, I don't know. I think I may have screwed the pooch here. I think I may have just blown my last shot." And that day, the phone rang, and it was Stone's producer, and he says, "Oliver likes what you have to say. Come in, and we'll make a deal." And I did. And without running you through that whole drill, he ended up giving me 33 actors and 3 weeks in the mountains of the Philippines.
Wow.
And, commander's intent, what he said was, when you bring them down out of those mountains, they better be who we were as 19-year-olds in Vietnam. Now, that's the commander's intent. Those are your orders, carry it out. And, I had these guys, I had no concept about movie stars or that sort of thing. I just didn't know doodly squat. I was making it up. And that's, once again, I go to your question. I was making it up on the fly, just as you do typically when, the gunny says, go there and move those sandbags. What sandbags? Did you figure it out? And so I had guys who are now were no big name then, but certainly are now. I had Charlie Sheen and Willem Dafoe and Forrest Whitaker, Tom Berenger, on and on and on. So what I did was I said, look, if I was running an infantry training regiment, or you guys call it what? IT, I can't remember what the Marine Corps calls it now, but it's what comes after boot camp. How would I do that? And I said, well, this has got to be full immersion. So these guys have got to dig a hole and live in that hole with me for the next 3 weeks. And I'm going to wear their ass out. And I'll probably feed them twice a day if they don't piss me off that day. And we went through it, and I let them have it. And I had enlisted a couple of reserve Marines who were buddies of mine to go with me and serve as OPFOR, what we call the Switchblade Force. And those were the guys who attacked at night and all that sort of thing. And, I ran them through it, and it was 24 hours a day, all night ops, all day ops. And they really could not get away from it. Their whole deal for that 3 weeks was, how do I not piss off that white-haired guy? How do I survive this? But when we brought them down out of there, they were amazing. They looked and felt and talked and acted just like we did when we were 19 in Southeast Asia. And the upshot, frankly, was that we brought that little $5 million film home, and that's all we had. We had $5 million in the bank, not a penny more. We brought it home, and lo and behold, we won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director for Oliver. And, as they say, nothing succeeds like success in Hollywood. And suddenly my phone was ringing off the wall. And I actually had a phone now, and I formed this company, and I formed the company according to my Marine Corps training. The IRS was a little suspicious of it, but when I formed my company, I didn't have a CEO or a CFO or an office manager and that thing. What I had was a commanding officer, an executive officer in the company gunny, and a battalion adjutant. And I actually wrote those on tax forms, which got me a couple of visits from the IRS.
I'm sure.
But that's essentially how it happened, and I've talked way too long. I'm sorry, but
that's amazing.
No, I'm just looking at your IMDb as you're talking about this, and from the word jump, I mean, Platoon, you also did Invaders from Mars that same year, but I'm looking as time, you did 2 films in 87, you did 3 in 88, you did 5 and 89. It's like you went from trying to get your foot in the door into like probably figuring out how the hell am I going to fit all this into my schedule. I mean, they were
threw a frag in the hooch.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, we added it up the other day, and I'll tell you guys, I can't believe it. We had to do another interview. Somebody wanted to interview me about my career, and we added it up, and it's something like 90 some movies or television shows that I've done. And that includes things like music videos and live performances. So I don't know. I mean, it just it exploded, and the more it exploded, the more I understood. I had a tiger by the tail here.
Mm-hmm.
I had an opportunity to influence audiences around the world. And affect their opinion of who we are as military people, to explain things about our weird sense of humor, about why we act the way we do sometimes, and the effect that combat can have on us. I could depict the absolute best of human nature and absolute worst of human nature, which happens in combat. You see both sides. And that was a powerful tool. And I said, I can't screw around with this. This is live ammo. And if I'm going to do this, I've got to do it right. So at that point, I really started to formulate things. I really started to say, look, I have a responsibility here. I have responsibility because I now have access to the popular media. I have a responsibility to everybody who's ever worn a uniform, actually, and to shine some long overdue and well-deserved light on their service and their sacrifice. So I always kept that in mind, and that turned out to be our motto. Actually, our motto is, we'll do anything from the Peloponnesian Wars to Star Wars. And we've screwed around, just about done that.
Yeah.
But we always had that onus, that weight on us that said, look, careful what you do and careful how you do it, because you need to be accurate. And yet, you can't sugarcoat things. You can't be a propagandist. There have been bad things happen in America's wars, and we've got to not be afraid to expose those things. But we must expose them in context. And so, philosophically, that's where I went. And that's where I'm still going, I think.
It's kind of,
and yes, let me just say a word about books. I guess I've written 12 or 13 of them now. And the reason I do it, the reason I run a publishing company now, frankly, is because it's part and parcel of what I was just telling you about. In every way I have available to me, using every talent that I have, that I've been blessed to have, I want to get that message out there about who we are, about the warrior spirit, about what we believe and how we act and why we act that way. I want to give people who've never had that experience a little chance to unscrew our heads and look inside. And I do that in every fashion I can find. Themed entertainment, music videos, video games, novels, books, movies, and television. So I'm trying to hit everything with one bat, but there you go.
No, absolutely. And I'll be honest, growing up with Platoon being one of my all-time favorite movies, and that was one of the films that we watched during my tour in Baghdad. In fact, that was the first time I saw Band of Brothers as well. I was deployed there March of 04 to March of 05. So that was fresh stuff at the time. And if you did nothing else besides Platoon, I feel like you did it all. And because a lot of the guys I served with, we still have the friendly argument over a beer or two that Barnes or Elias.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Elias.
Barnes or Elias.
Listen, I have that argument, and I don't want to answer it.
Right. But what you'd said there really kind of struck a chord too with me, and it leads me to my second question for you. And we talked a little bit about this in Fredericksburg as well. I had a similar role to you as a military advisor for an independent film here in Texas, and was brought on because of my combat experience, and I struggled with some of that same stuff. With I remember the lead actor putting on a pair of Marine Corps trousers, and they were a little tight around the waist, and I made the comment, "Well, fat body, you're on half rations the rest of this trip. You need to fit into those trousers." And I had a talking to that's not how you talk to actors. But how do you, in your mind, how do we balance what people really need and what we want? Because we do, I think there's a good portion of the American public that wants these military movies, wants to remember the sacrifice and honor what, my grandfather did that, or my great uncle, or my dad was drafted for Nam. But how do you balance? Sometimes the inaccuracies are necessary for the film, or there's not enough, character development. So you got to give that guy a mustache so you can remember him. How do you balance that? Or is that a case by case scenario based on the director?
Well, look, it is a case by case scenario. And I've got to tell you, in all honesty, I think we've won 8 Academy Awards and 13 Emmys at this point on films that we've worked on. So I don't have a lot of that problem. If it's a Captain Die film, there's a whole. I come at it now from a little bit of a perspective of power. I walk in and say, "Look, guys, I'm going to do this. I'm going to help you, but you have to recognize that I'm a dramatist, so I'm on your side. I get storytelling. I get how to do this. I've learned how to do this, and you have to move in my direction by saying we want it to be as accurate as it can." Now, that doesn't mean flag waving all the time. It can be brutally accurate to the point that we've screwed up here, but that may be the story, and it may well be the story that needs to be revealed. So early on, to get to your original question, I did have a hell of a time with that balance, and I think I'm enough of a bullshit artist that I could get in there. If I'm saying something horrible, let me know. But
No, you're good.
Good.
I think I was able to schmooze to convince them that I might have an element here that they want to pay attention to. I didn't hard ass them. I didn't go in there and say, "Oh, you people are screwed up like Hogan's goat. I'm through. I'm walking out of here. And if I ever see anybody that looks like you, I'll kill them." That was never going to work. And I knew it wasn't. So I found a balance where I could respectfully, kind of like you do with a lieutenant. If you're a gunnery sergeant and you got this lieutenant and you know that he commands the platoon, but he's got his head up his butt and he clearly doesn't know what's going on. You can't just say, "Lieutenant, pull your head out of your ass." You got to go over there and say, "Sir, look," and you explain it to him. That's kind of what I did. I kind of used that tact, which is one of the leadership traits. I kind of used that tact to go over and say, "Let me suggest," and I tried to make it a habit never to say no. No, period. I would say no, but, because I would always have in my pocket the suggestion that would be a better way of going at it and a more accurate way of going at it and a better depiction of the situation that was going on. So you're right. You're absolutely right that it was, it's a tough balance. And it's not something, you bring your Marine Corps tact to it as a leadership trait. But it's experience. You just got to get your pee-pee whacked every once in a while, and you got to stand at attention and say, "Okay, I lose this one," and you back off. Fortunately, nowadays, I don't have that problem.
Well, it had to be rewarding and helpful that one of your first projects, or the first project, Platoon, was such a great film and looked at with such reverence. And I'm sitting here trying to think how different that movie would have been if you wouldn't have walked into that editing booth and saying, I'm like trying to think, would the scene where they find out he sprayed bug spray on his feet to try to get, how would have those scenes played out if they didn't spend that week, in the trenches, or your impact on that film? And I go back, try to think, prior to Platoon, was there any other military-based movie that showed not only the fight against the enemy, but Mother Nature too? And so when you're going on these additional projects and you're trying to present your evidence, it had to be a lot easier knowing the fact that your first film was such a huge success that you had that to show as the outline for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're correct. I mean, as I said, nothing succeeds like success in Hollywood. And you had people saying, "Well, we've had this project for years, but we couldn't figure out how to do it." And said, "I'll take care of it." And I found that early on, the best way to go at it is early. Get in it as early as you can. Nowadays, I'm in at the conceptual point. I talk to the writers before they ever sit down at the keyboard, and talk to the producers and the directors about money and how to spend it properly and all that sort of thing. But none of that, to go directly to what you had to say, none of that would I be able to do had it not been for the great success, that great stroke of luck that I had with Platoon.
One of the key positions of a quality consultant is to be aware of their time, their schedule, and have a good team that works, around them and directly with them. How do you get to that point that when the requests come in at such a high level and at such a large volume that you realize we can't actually participate in these other projects that we're getting requests for because it's going to take away from the quality of work that we're doing on these projects that we're already working on? Do you have a team of trusted people that you hand projects off that you just logistically can't fit into a schedule, or maybe it's not exactly what you're into?
Look, we're able to do multiple films around the world now. And I was smart enough, and this goes to your original question about what things I learned in the Marine Corps and how I carried them over into what I'm doing now. I learned to use a staff. I had been a staffer, and I certainly learned to use one very quickly. So what I did was I reached out and I got some guys who'd been in Vietnam with me. And one of them I've known has been my executive officer in Warriors Incorporated, now Warriors Global these days, for 50 years, half a century. He's been my XO. And he and I were young corporals and sergeants together in Vietnam. So you get that guy. And then you begin to build out. And frankly, I've tried them all. I've tried all the high-speed, low-drag guys and so on and so forth. But they're usually one-trick ponies. What I found works best is to find and adopt and adapt a Marine Corps squad leader. You get that sergeant who's led 11, 12, 13 men, depending on the era that he was in. And he knows how to teach, and he knows how to lead, and he knows those things about leadership principle and all that sort of thing. So he's my favorite guy. And what I did was I got 4 or 5 of them, and I began to train them in the Captain Die method. And we found ourselves able to do one picture on one side of the world and another picture on the other side of the world, but they were both Warriors Incorporated pictures, and they were both done in my inimitable fashion. And that's because I built the staff.
Technology has probably made the logistics of that a lot easier now. Opposed to conference calls, now you can just visually see what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. But you got to remember, we didn't have this crapola back in those days. I mean, I had to pick up a telephone and put in my AT&T card and dial up the other side of the world to get a sit rep, from what was happening in Australia while I was in Europe. So I'd talk to my XO, and he'd say, "Well, here's what we got. What do you think?" And I'd tell him what I thought we should do. But now, technology is an enormous help. We can, FaceTime, and we can do Zoom calls and all that sort of thing. So while guys are out there running them through it, I don't necessarily have to be there at the head of the column, although I like to be. I got to admit, I turn 80 next month, but I'm still out there PTing and pushing weight and still wanting to do this sort of thing. My wife's objects to it a little bit more vociferously than she used to. But I'm kind of trying to take a step back and utilize that technology that you mentioned, and see if I can't offload a little bit in order to do that. But it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Sure.
I mean, this is my baby. I built this thing, and I taught people how to do this. And a lot of people have tried to copy it. Not many have been successful. So I don't know whether I'm actually going to be able to let go of the reins or not. I'll probably just keel over, and that'll be the end of it. You'll never hear another thing.
I know Jeff has some questions, and we want to get into the author side of your history, but I have one last question on this particular topic. Speaking of technology, has the way you guys gone about the training and your original outline for your mission statement in the movies, how have you had to adapt that now that it seems like more productions are going with the CGI versus actual, physical I just went completely blank on the practical.
Yeah.
Thank you. The practical effects. How has that changed the way you guys have come in your original mission statement?
It's been a factor, no question, because we're movie makers, we're filmmakers. And if you take, for instance, if you look at the most recent miniseries that we did in UK for Masters of the Air,
Mm-hmm.
That was huge amounts of CGI, huge amounts of computer-generated imagery, and you have to learn to use it. I mean, I have to go to the techno geeks and sit down with them and say, what the hell is this? What does this mean, and how do you do it? And if you're kind and nice to them, and buy them a beer or a lollipop or whatever, and occasionally they'll explain it to you, and you can get it, and you can sort of work your way through this sort of thing. But it's been a factor, no question. Fortunately, in most of the historical stuff that I do, World War II, World War I, Korea, and that sort of thing, it's not a factor. We do it practical for the most part. And really, I enjoy that better. I'd rather do it practical. CGI seems a bit of a cop-out to me. I realize that audiences are becoming more sophisticated and they're a bit jaded. So that if you don't offer them the CGI, they think it's a cheap shot movie, and we do fight that.
This episode is brought to you by our friends over at Fume. Fume cartridges are crafted from medical-grade polyester designed for use with essential oils. Fume, a non-vape, non-nicotine, non-tobacco device, works by replacing the hand-to-mouth fixation, calming nervous tension through fidgeting, and distracts you from the bad habits with delicious flavors. Psychologists have shown stopping a bad habit cold turkey is very hard for your brain. The Fume handheld device has a built-in fidget, also has a weight similar to most vape pens. If you're interested in replacing old bad habits with new good habits, head on over to tryfume.com/D410M and get yourself a free pack of toppers with your purchase. The toppers is a perfect new accessory designed with your comfort in mind. Slip it onto the mouthpiece for a softer, warmer feel. So replace those old habits with a new habit, a good habit. Simply go to tryfume.com/D410M. That's tryfume.com/D410M.
I've got no further questions unless he's looking for another E5 for Warriors Inc. in the Central Texas area. But this is Dennis's turn now, I think.
Captain Dye, sir, I'm an avid reader. I'm devouring books all the time, and I have pretty much zero time for fiction, but I have really enjoyed Peleliu File. One of the habits, or something that I'd done ever since I could remember, when I'm reading about someone that I admire, for instance, Shackleton or Joshua Chamberlain or Grant, his amazing memoirs, if in their reading their memoir, if they mention a book that was impactful to them or a person that was impactful to them, I'll write it in the flyleaf of the book, and then I'll buy that book, right? And I'm wondering, sir, who inspired you? What books were important to you, and what people did you really admire?
Look, it's funny, but I have exactly the same height. You see these books in here? This is 1/3 of the library. The other, it's about 1,200 volumes.
Wow.
And I'm that kind of guy. I'm voracious. I read and I write all the time. But to answer your question, I guess, I've read all the classics. I've read Clausewitz and Mao Zedong and all of the really philosophical works on war. But I like to be entertained. I like to be, and it's you dig through those things. I mean, they're so dense. And you pull out one or two gems and jewels and you write them down somewhere, and okay, Jesus, I hope I never have to go through that again. I love Once an Eagle, Anton Myrer. I love all of the early Marine stuff that has been done. I think I have 3 or 4 bookshelves just full of Marine fiction, World War II primarily. although there's some great Korea stuff. I wrote a book called The Korean Odyssey, which was I think my last published book. Oh, by the way, not that you mentioned Peleliu File, here's my plug. We just got it out, and in October, it'll be in audiobooks.
Oh,
So
awesome.
you can go after Peleliu File in audiobooks.
Did you do the reading on that?
What's that?
Did you do the reading on the audiobook?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Nice.
What's
Excellent.
left of my voice.
I was gonna say who maybe Mike Rowe if you're lucky, but other than that, no, you can't beat your voice.
Yeah,
Maybe
I know.
you,
I hear the same
Sam
thing.
Elliott, and then maybe Mike Rowe. But no, you're the only one who can read your books.
Well, I'm the only one that can figure out how to pronounce the sort of things I do.
The truth.
The Peleliu File is out in October in audiobook. But I think the writers who have influenced me are guys like Anton Meyrer. I'm a great admirer of Jack Reacher and Lee Child. I read Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, all over the place. So I'm eclectic. I pick and choose these things. But there, I'd have to go in and look at the names of all the Marines whose books I write and enjoy, and some of which are really esoteric. You have a hell of a time finding them, but when you do, they're gems, they're jewels. But I'm with you. I think people are losing that hunger for the written word, and I think that's unfortunate. There's something about having a book in your hands that you don't get with a Kindle, and you don't get with your
Absolutely.
computer. I mean, there's something because you can underline things, you can write notes to yourself, or you can. Boy, I love that turn of phrase, and you just put an exclamation point beside it. I mean, I love doing that.
Yep.
Now, I got to admit, look, we have 6-bedroom huge house here in Texas. And half of it's filled with books, and it depends on which day it is. I'll go in and find something and work on it. But I get it; we're kindred spirits.
Well, the nice little benefit to that too, as Jeff and Dennis and I do as well. We get we inherit a lot of used books. People find, oh, you're in military history. Jeff all the time gets crates of books. But to your point about writing down notes, oftentimes we get to read other people's thoughts. We get to see other people's notes and things they found interesting, and I don't know who this guy is, but I agree with him.
Yeah, that's a great thing about used books. And if somebody has a used bookstore 40 miles south of here, I'll go.
Yes. Because
you find that one gem that some guy has written his notes in. And they're brilliant. They're absolute brilliant insights. Often it's a guy who was involved in the thing that you're reading about. So I'm with you. I get that.
Well, whoever years down the road gets my copy of With the Old Breed, it's dog-eared and marked up and highlighted, and it's got Dorito stains on it.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I've got more beer and spaghetti stains on half my books, and nobody will ever want them again. But I don't care. I want them. So.
Sir, did you have the opportunity to meet Kobayashi's grandson? I was very moved by the lead character's efforts to find Kobayashi, and I love the way that you meld current events and modern history with the past, and with this nice touch of fiction. It just weaves beautifully. Have you had the opportunity to have any interaction with Kobayashi's grandson?
No, I haven't. I wish I would, but I haven't. The occasion hasn't arisen.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, don't you know somebody who knows General Kobayashi's grandson, don't you?
Yeah. I was just thinking that maybe I need to give Shiro a call. He usually comes to Texas every March. Maybe we can see if we can arrange that, because that's come up before. Dale, I live about an hour from you here in Central Texas. I definitely hope to stay in touch, and boy, I'd love to be able to visit with you one-on-one, because if you talk about kindred spirits, I feel like I'm looking at myself in 40 years.
Well, look, here's
It's
what you do.
unbelievable.
Well, I hope that's true. But you guys pack up and come on down to Lockhart. We have rooms in the house that are called the Imperial War Museum, and they've got stuff in there that I know you haven't seen. But I surround myself with this, and it keeps you into the spirit, I think. But you're welcome anytime. Is the point of that.
And don't say that too loud. You're going to have 3 ne'er-do-wells knocking on your door.
It wouldn't be the first time, believe me.
I feel the same way, sir. If I turn this camera around, I'm just surrounded with fighter pilots, aces, signed autographs, Winston Churchill, B-17 bombers, John Wayne, she wore a yellow ribbon poster, Iwo Jima. It's all over. Over on my bookshelf over there is a bayonet from Dr. Carmelito Arcangel, who was at Quezon, and he was a company commander. And he handed me his bayonet from Vietnam. And he says, "I want you to have this, Dennis." I worked with him in the emergency room at trauma, and he says, "I want you to have this. I know you'll appreciate it."
Yeah.
And I pulled it out, and it's razor sharp. And he said, "It's drawn blood. I want you to have it." And I thought, my goodness, what an honor.
Well, I have one wall that's all of the movies that we've done. So you'll see all the units that we trained and all that sort of thing. But I have a thing about stuff. A picture or something is fine, but I have a thing that you can pick up and handle. Mortar sights and
Wow.
And rounds and all that sort of thing, and I like that because when I hit mental blocks, when I can't figure out where to go next, I'll go out and fondle some war toy.
Mm-hmm.
It's as weird as that sounds. It's aha, and I know where to go.
That's the most powerful educational tool. Dennis knows this because he's been to several events with me where I bring my displays and living history at air shows and things like that.
Yeah, we talked a
I
little
just
bit about
spoke
that. Yeah, you told me.
Yeah. And I just spoke in San Antonio 2 weeks ago to a group of kids at the Tex Hill Wing there, brought some artifacts. But I told them, I said, I let them try on all of my deuce gear, right? The musette bag and the canteens full of water, and just so they had an idea, in the steel pot. And I told them, just like you said, it doesn't matter the first time you see something under glass, but you make a connection with it when you touch it, when you feel it.
Right.
Now you remember it.
Precisely right.
And there's nothing that can replace.
You make with your hands.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Oh man,
Absolutely.
good going.
You cannot reproduce the smell of 80-year-old web gear. Just can't do it. Just can't do it.
No, you can't. There is nothing like it.
I was sitting here thinking, all 4 of us, if we all turn our cameras around, we're all surrounded by. I'm looking at 7M1 helmets.
I see it.
We're all in miniature. We're all in miniature studios and museums here. Let me ask you, what came first in your chicken or egg? Were you writing books and poetry and journals before you got into the movies, or was your time on set and working with writers and seeing rewrites that help you kind of figure out the books?
Look, I think I've always been an Irish storyteller all my life. I was the kid and around a campfire that could tell you a shaggy dog story that had absolutely no point, but I would keep you riveted for 15 minutes because of the way I told the story. That's always the guy I was. So I think I come by a little bit of it naturally. But I have to say, I came home out of about 33 months on the line in Vietnam, pretty well screwed up. I didn't know it. You never do. That you're screwed up. Everybody else is screwed up, not you. But I was carrying a lot of demons. There was a lot of poison in my guts, and a lot of imagery that I couldn't shake. And I guess we would call it PTSD, although I hate that name. I hate that term. I think PTS is fine, but D means it's a disorder, and it's not. It's perfectly natural.
Mm-hmm.
But I was suffering from this stuff, and I couldn't get it out. You know, all the crap old excuses you've heard from the guys that came home from the Middle East wars recently. Nobody knows, nobody understands. I don't want to tell anybody because I don't want to relive it. Nobody can understand, and if I told them, they wouldn't get it. So I just got to sit here and be a poor. You know, that's crying the poor ass, and I don't believe in it. So what I decided was the way to get by this was to write about it, to talk about it. Now, I had a hell of a time finding anybody that wanted to read it or listen to it, but that didn't stop me. I knew that I was healing. If I could get this stuff out, it was poison, and it was sitting in my heart and in my mind and in my guts, and it was fermenting. It was rotting, and I needed to get that out. I needed to expunge that stuff. And so I said, well, how can I do that? And it occurred to me that I have a talent. I can speak. I can create images. I can write. And so let me do that. Let me talk about these things in one fashion or another. And it's cathartic.
Mm-hmm.
It was catharsis. And it was much more effective than self-medicating with booze or anything else. So I said, look, I can do this. So I started writing. This hopefully goes back to your original question, if I can remember it. So I started writing while I was still in uniform. And I found that it was cathartic. It helped me justify things. It helped me explain things. It helped me feel that I was not a bad person. I was simply caught in a bad situation, as were hundreds of thousands of others. And I had to understand it, and I had to talk about it. And when I did, and this sort of carried over into what I did in show biz, but when I did, I relieved myself of an enormous pressure, of enormous guilt. And I brought myself into a certain clarity, into a certain understanding of what I had been through, and therefore what other people had been through. I mean, look, guys who went through a lot worse than I did, from all wars. And so I began to preach the business of talking about it, getting it out, get the poison out, expose the poison to air. And I think I helped some folks in that regard. And what I found was that my first book that I wrote about it was called Run Between the Raindrops. It's about my experiences in Hue and Tet of 1968. Was a hit. And I said, well, there you go. Not only can I medicate myself here by getting the ghosts out, the demons out, but I can tell great stories that help people understand what men at war, or women at war these days, but what people at war go through. And so that's a long-winded answer to a question I can barely remember, but I think it had something to do about.
No, you answered it.
Why I'm writing.
That was great.
And I started writing.
No, that was great. Captain Dye, when I was writing my book about my experiences in the emergency room for 23 years, my darkness, I called it my dark passenger. And what was really interesting was that when I started writing, it was so cathartic. And it was like it's digital, but I was like, I could almost imagine the typewriter, and every letter was taking the inky darkness from me, and it was coming out, and it was like tapping into that, and it was puncturing the paper, and it was there. It wasn't in here anymore. And it was
like you're fighting back against the demons.
Yes. It was so cathartic. I absolutely understand. Yeah. A perfect analogy. So good. And what was the name of that book, sir? Your first one?
Run Between the Raindrops.
Run Between the Raindrops.
We were getting chopped up so bad in Hue that I was with a corpsman. It was a long line of wounded men laying up against the wall of the Citadel. And he just looked at it and shook his head, and he said, damn, guy, I said, trying to get through this Hue city without getting wounded is like trying to run between the raindrops without getting wet.
Mm-hmm.
There's a book in there, and lo and behold, there was.
Wow, man.
One of,
gracious, I feel like we could talk forever.
one of the benefits that we have as podcasters and interviewers is a lot of times when we engage in deep conversations like this, we have thoughts that have never occurred to us previously. And I just had one of those. Through time, journaling was always a thing. Definitely in the 17, 18, or early 1900s, writing was the key way to communicate with people outside of your audible realm. And as time goes by up until now, the irony of the 2000s and primarily 2024 is we all have a way to communicate digitally and to type and to write in our hands. But especially the younger generations, they've all gotten to the point where they can't take the time to write out. So now everything's shorthand and abbreviated. And I'm wondering, you guys are talking, and we've all experienced, I did some writing in the past, the catharticism that comes from writing, getting your thoughts out onto paper or into the digital paper, your computer, in long form. I wonder if possibly the reason so many young adults and kids are seeing and experiencing such high levels of anxiety and depression is because no one is taking the time to write their thoughts out in long form, to get that free therapy just from typing or writing by hand.
I think you've hit on a key factor there. I mean, look, I don't know how they do this with their thumbs. I mean, I'm still doing this, but the point is, I think you're exactly right. I think there is a therapy in creating something. To me, it's like an artist who has an easel in front of him, a canvas, and he daubs on some things, or he draws on it with chalk or crayon or whatever, and there's something inside him that's now coming out through his hands or his eyes, and it's turning into something else. Now, we do that by sitting there at a keyboard or at a typewriter, if you will, or even longhand, sitting there and transcribing to a notebook. And we understand our age, at least, I don't mean to put years on you guys, but the point is, I think you've all experienced the fact that there's a certain release in that.
Mm-hmm.
If nothing else, it gives you the time to think.
Yes. Because
you've got to think of what I'm going to type next or what I'm going to write next. And you don't have that when you're trying to do, a 24-second communication on a text message. And so I think you're exactly right. I think we're missing out on taking the time to at least put our thoughts down. And sometimes what that tells us is our thoughts are absolute bullshit. and frankly, we need to think again.
Yeah.
But we've taken that time to do that. And so I do think youngsters are missing that.
Go ahead, Jeff.
We've talked about that on the show before, and I know we probably need to start wrapping it up here. But we mentioned before how I feel like I'm the last generation of fighting men who came home with a box of letters, right? I knew what it was like. I married my high school sweetheart, so I have every letter that I couldn't wait to get and to smell that piece of paper from her. Thankfully, when we think about the World War II, the greatest generation, so many times, grandpa, if you will, passes away before the family finds a footlocker in the attic with these artifacts, with these letters, with his thoughts. And the cell phone's not going to be here. That artifact is going to be long gone, along with every other email and text message. Mm-hmm. So we have to be careful. And my son now, my oldest, is he's in the middle of basic training for the Army right now. He's the 5th generation cop set to serve. And he's learning this new trade as a young man suffering at Fort Moore, Georgia, how to write mom and dad and girlfriend a letter. Yeah. Because not only the things that you mentioned, but again, it's an artifact. You're not going to keep a text message for 80 years, but
right. It is
but
a
letter. Absolutely. So,
especially private letters, because in a private letter, you can, to someone with whom you're intimate, someone you'll say things and reveal things and thoughts and feelings that you've had that you wouldn't say, in a corporate letter of some kind or a letter that had public access. And you find out that that was the value of those things. That was that guy crying, and that was that guy talking. Yeah. And so it has enormous value. You're right.
Just had an insane thought. Imagine now, Platoon, produced in 2024, and instead of Charlie Sheen narrating letters he's writing home to Grandma, you just have little short text messages typing across the screen. The impact wouldn't be there.
Don't say that. Some idiot's going to try to do it.
It is an existing IP, and Hollywood loves existing IP, so you never know.
No, you don't.
Real quick, we're going to get into the end of the show that people love, and that is what are you reading? And we're going to start with you, Mr. Dale Dye. What you reading?
You know what? I'm reading 3 books by C.S. Forester recently. One is The Gun, and I forget what the other ones are. But I was introduced to C.S. Forester by Tom Hanks, as a matter of fact. We did. A Rifleman Dodd is the other one. Rifleman Dodd and The Gun, and there's a third one I'm reading. Now it's provincial, and it's a bit Elizabethan in its vocabulary. But Forster wrote a book called The Good Shepherd just before, during World War II. In fact, he wrote it, and Tom Hanks loved it, and we based a movie called Greyhound off of C.S. Forster's The Good Shepherd. And so Tom introduced me to this, and I said, "Whoa, I've got to read this." And then I got interested in C.S. Forester and began to read him. And I'm like that. I'm compulsive as hell. If I find somebody's books I like, I mean, just take Lee Child and the Jack Reacher series. Now, there's nothing spectacular about that. It's a blatant entertainment. But I must have 24 or 25 of his books on a bookshelf in there, because I read one and I said, I love this stuff, and bought them all. So I get it. I'm like that. But C.S. Forester is what I'm reading right now, and I'm writing a new book. So I won't tell you about that one because I haven't figured out exactly where it's going yet. But it's about the CIA in Central America. How's that?
We'll happily have you back on when that book comes to time for media.
Sure.
Hey, Jeff, what you reading?
I'm in a few projects right now. I picked up a first edition Ernest Hemingway Men at War. Of course, familiar. Of course, that shows up in a trash can in a scene of the Pacific. And I had to get a first edition Hemingway. I'm a huge Hemingway fan, and so I got through some of Caesar's commentaries and read about Thermopylae. But then spent a night over there at Dennis's before I spoke in San Antonio. And I just happened to get into seeing Gettysburg for the first time. I don't know where I've been. The Civil War surpassed me somehow. I just spend too much time in the Second World War. Not too much, but I don't spend enough in other realms. As you guys know, I really enjoy the First World War because you can't understand that second without the first. But I am enthralled with Joshua Chamberlain and Little Round Top. So I'm also in the middle of Chamberlain's Bayonet Forward that I'm borrowing from Dennis. But I also have to have something from World War II, right? I mean, we talk about this. It doesn't matter what I'm reading. I'm also reading something about World War II, and I'm doing a little research on the importance of the OS-2U Kingfisher, an aircraft during World War II that does not get a whole lot of notoriety. The Kingfisher was there observing the guns off the coast of Peleliu during the invasion. They were spotting for the bigger ships out there, and believe it or not, the Kingfisher picked up a pretty important pilot that was stranded for 3 weeks in 1942. He just happened to be the leading American ace from World War I. Eddie Rickenbacker gets down in the Pacific in November of 42. 3 weeks later, is picked up by a Kingfisher. So interesting stuff there on an aircraft that's pretty easily overlooked. But I'm enjoying all of those reads right now.
Hey, Dennis, what you reading?
I am reading Peleliu File.
Yay!
What's that guy's name again? What
I
was
don't
the
know.
author?
Some goofy bastard. But yeah.
Some guy.
Oh man, I tell you what, I'm about a quarter through Shake Davis. What a great name. I love his daughter. I love that she's on Wake Island. I love that he's on Ewo sat phoning her. I there was the author who taught me a lot about writing is Mitch Weiss, Pulitzer Prize winning author, and he taught me something that I have got a lot from my reviews from the books I got out. And Captain Dye, you definitely have it. That ability to complete a chapter in such a way that the reader says, one more chapter, and then I'll turn the light out and go to sleep.
I'm a horrible guy like that.
And then you get to the end of that chapter and you're like, oh God dang it, one more.
Not to beat my own tom here, but Peleliu File was the second of the Shake Davis books, and there's I think 10 of them now. There's Lao's File, Chosin File, Contra File, and they take Shake through all of these. Many of them have historical. For instance, there's the Aztec File, which has him back at Chapultepec, and you'll see all of these things. So if you follow the series, you'll always get that Marine Corps connection in there.
Yeah, definitely.
In fact, I've been told Marines love them, so I guess, and they sell well. So I don't know who's buying them.
It's a fast read. It's definitely a fast read. It flows nicely. My book on, we always talk about projects and this and that. My book on Bonsai Cliff at Saipan is all done. It's been edited 10 times, so that should be coming out pretty soon. I have an artist in the country of Georgia working on the cover right now.
Have you been out to Saipan and stood on the cliffs?
No, sir.
You should.
No.
I've one of the greatest thrills of my life is to be able to. I've made almost all the islands: Iwo Jima, Peleliu, Saipan, Tinian, Guam, and Guadalcanal. But standing on there, especially, what the hell? Now that you've written it,
yes, sir.
Tuck a copy under your arm and get your ass out to Saipan and take a look. You'll love it. Especially.
Speaking of that book, I've been super wicked busy, and I'm getting ready to look at my library and crack open a new book now that I finished my Merrill Marauders book. But the last book I read, I actually proofread that book for Dennis. And let me say, Dennis, thank you. That was an extreme honor to be asked for my opinions on that book. But, you're talking about Dale's ability to write and to keep you interested. I literally read your book twice before giving you the few notes that I had. And I know your end goal is to make that into a series of short books and short stories. And let me tell you, sir, you got something there. You and I have discussed that off the air, that particular topic is one that is covered briefly on a few TV shows here and there, but is by and large overlooked when it comes to the history of the campaigns in the Pacific. And the importance of that book and to get that story out there is super important in my view. And so you got yourself a great little book there, and just thank you so much for allowing me to proofread that. And I'm so excited for you to, once that thing gets published and people have the ability to add it to their libraries. You should be very proud of that book.
Well, thank you, Don. Captain Dye, I was fortunate to interview hundreds of World War II veterans through the years. And it just so happened my grandpa was on a gunboat in the Pacific, and that's how I found out about Bonsai Cliff, was interviewing my grandfather's shipmates and other guys from these gunboats, a Flotilla 3, that were coasting along the beach with these megaphones and the interpreters trying to get the Japanese to. And what's interesting is my grandfather never talked about anything, but he did talk about people jumping off the cliffs. And yeah,
it's one of those weird, unexpected incidents in war. You expect death and you expect incoming artillery and shooting and violence and horror. And that's one thing. You expect that. You've been taught to expect that. But you see something like the Suicide Cliffs out on Saipan, Banzai Cliffs, some people call and you see women with their babies jumping off and killing themselves on the rocks below those cliffs. That's something that I think imprints so deeply that you can talk about it. You have to.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Dale,
All right. What other horror have you guys got for me?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just gonna wish you an early 80th birthday, Captain Dye, and don't be surprised if you're around when my son graduates from scout training in the second week of December. I bring him home for a few weeks for Christmas. I'd love to give you a call, and I'd love for the family to meet you. It would just be an absolute honor for all of us, and especially for my son.
I mean, I love it. You know, I meant it when I said kindred spirits. It's one of the reasons I'm glad to do this sort of thing. It's another one of those cathartic events. You know, I can talk to people and I can shorthand stuff, and you get it.
Yes, sir.
So it's a pleasure to do it. I'm glad to.
Absolutely.
Bring him by, and we'll show him around.
Will do.
We want to thank everybody for tuning in for another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast from myself, Jeff Copsetta, Dennis Blocker Jr., and the one, the only Captain Dale Dye. Thank you guys so much, and we'll be back with you all next week.
This has been a Digital 410 production.